Hello, and welcome to the Intelligent Inbound podcast brought to you by SmartBug Media. I'm your host, Jen Spencer, and today I'm speaking with Dan Slagen, Chief Marketing Officer at Tomorrow.io, the world's only weather intelligence platform. And Dan is a four-time startup executive specializing in scaling global go-to-market functions from early stage to over 100 million in ARR. He's also the author of Understanding Startup CEOs. I cannot wait to chat about that. But welcome, Dan. I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I was thinking I have a bunch of marketing questions to ask you, but one of the things that we have in common is that we both dabbled in B2B and B2C. A lot of marketers I meet now, they kind of are been in one lane. For me, I personally have significantly more experience on the B2B side, but when I started in marketing, it was B2C. What about you? And what do you like better?
It's an excellent question. I actually started at a company called CSN Stores, which rebranded into what is now Wayfair. So I started out
Ah,
it was earlier, first couple hundred people over there. So I started out in consumer to start, and then I transformed over to B2B. And since then, it's interesting because you kind of have a range of SMB to enterprise. And the enterprise versus consumer, it feels like two different universes. But as you start to get into the SMB, especially you get down to some of the smaller companies, even solopreneurs, it almost starts to become a little bit more similar to consumer. There's pros and
yeah.
cons of each, of course. What I love about consumer is just how quickly you get the data back. You're able to just move at
Yeah.
lightning speed. If you need to understand a certain type of usage pattern or advertising campaign or content success rate, it seems like you can know that overnight over B2C. The downside of that is that you can also see some of your trends change overnight, and things that you've been able
Yeah.
to really depend on and be your bread and butter might not be the case, in the next quarter or something like that. Whereas with B2B, once you've kind of figured out your strategy, it does almost start to create like a marketing moat, if you will. So
Mhm.
I spent the majority of my time like you, just more on the B2B side, but certainly enjoyed both. We at Tomorrow, actually, we have a consumer app in the App Store as well. We have a couple million people using it. So I love to create to collaborate with the B2C team, especially when we're talking about the ad concepts. We were recently talking about the winter advertising campaign ideas, and I do love it. You do have a sense of you can be a little bit more fun and creative and kind of get some of those more out there ideas.
Yeah, for sure. And as you were sharing your story, I was like, I reflected a little bit because when I was in on the B2C side, I'm sorry, I was not only was it a while ago, but it was also for a nonprofit, and so we were really still very much in traditional advertising. I remember my newspaper and radio sales guys being like, "Oh, this website advertising is this thing, and we send a newsletter and you could sponsor the newsletter," and like that was digital marketing. And I think, oh my gosh, if I could do like knowing what I know now about digital marketing and inbound marketing, and if I could like take just like pause life, go back and implement that somehow in that my old job, I'm like, oh, I wonder what could be accomplished. So, but
Yeah, but you wouldn't have the same appreciation levels that you do now for it.
right. Yeah. Yeah, this is true. This is true. So, well, cool. Well, let's dig into what things are like over at tomorrow.io. And actually, I want to ask you, do people do you refer to yourself as tomorrow or tomorrow.io? I'm just wondering, does the .io and the .ais in the world follow everybody in their language?
It's an excellent question. We are so there's a rebranding strategy, especially in kind of modern day. So when I joined the company about 2 years ago, actually, the company was ClimaCon. That was the
Mm.
name of the company. And earlier this year, we went through a rebrand. We decided to go down that path, and it was a fun experience. The CEO and I basically made the agreement with each other that if we don't find the absolute must have, can't live without name, then we're not doing it. But we found Tomorrow. We agreed on it. We really liked Tomorrow.io. There were some other options there as well, but that's the one we ultimately went with. And as we think about the branding strategy in a relaunch, the initial thing we want is for people to just know exactly who we are and how to find us. And so tomorrow.io is how we currently refer to ourselves. And as the brand grows over time, that may change, but currently it's tomorrow.io.
There you go. All right, perfect. Just a marketer's curiosity there. So,
Yep.
speaking of marketing, what as the CMO there, what kind of support do you have? What does your marketing team look like? What are those human resources that you have on your team? Because I'm going to be asking you some questions about marketing successes and for context, it's good to understand if you've got, a small group, if you're a one man show or if you've got this extraordinary team.
I am fortunate to have an extraordinary team over here. We are a wonderfully diverse company in terms of sort of the different markets that we're able to tackle. So here we have a bunch of business units. We have a consumer area of the business. We have an SMB part of the business, enterprise. We even have a .org that's bringing weather forecasting to parts of the world like Africa and India as well. But at the high level, we structure the team in your traditional way. I really just like the simple format of brand, demand, product marketing. But then
Mhm.
we have those teams that are sort of built out across the different business units. So we have marketers that are focused on B2C, we have marketers focused on SMB, enterprise, and so on and so forth, that are then within the actual verticals of brand demand and product marketing. And you have some of the sub focus areas, things like PR and events live under one of those. But I like those as kind of the top three parent.
Wonderful. So how large? How many people do you have internally that make up all of those kind of sub teams?
That's a good question. I think we're currently almost going to be over 20 people relatively soon.
Nice, nice, awesome. Um, so this is the Intelligent Inbound podcast. We talk about intelligent inbound marketing. I'd love to know, as you look back on what you've done so far, I ideally at tomorrow.io, what you feel has been your most successful inbound marketing effort.
It's an excellent question. I think it has been around storytelling and attraction. Um, I put it that way as opposed to doing, blogging or content or webinar
Right.
because we've done so many different things and we've been pretty creative about the way that we've done them. And, inbound mixed with a little bit of demand generation, not even just paid, but even just outreach and those types of things has been really potent for us. But it's all been around what's the story that we're telling, what's the value that we're able to convey to folks, and how are we able to differentiate ourselves. So content and product marketing are huge parts of the business. One example I'll give is our ClimaCon conference. Rewind year and a half, almost 2 years ago now, and the whole world changed. And
Mm,
so our
yeah.
marketing strategy, like everyone else's, went out the window. And the plan that we had for the year just got erased, and we had to figure something out. And so we had an even smaller team at the time, and we just conceptualized, what if we do a conference? What if we just do an online conference? Well, we could do the whole thing virtual, and we had the mindset of, how hard could it be type of an approach. It's probably good that none of us ever run a conference before because if we had known, we never would have done it. But the start to finish was 6 weeks. We literally came up with the idea, and 6 weeks later, we were hosting
Wow.
the conference. We moved lightning fast. We had incredible speakers. We had customers from the NFL, customers from JetBlue come speak and just share their stories, not only about the state of the world and COVID, but more importantly, how things like weather and climate and air quality are impacting fans and employees and customers, and how using our software has helped save them XYZ. And the stories were fantastic. But that type of event that we created, all through storytelling and content, really made waves across the industry. And our first year attendance was higher by an order of magnitude than we ever expected, and all inbound.
That's okay. So coming from someone who has put on a conference before, I'm super impressed. Like that is amazing. Congratulations to you and your team. That's really truly impressive. And I imagine there's also, quite a bit just going on in our world, right? This is it's very very timely. It's highly topical. And one of my favorite intelligent inbound marketing strategies to employ is syncing up public relations and PR. And we talked about starting in B2C. I started in B2C and in public relations. So kind of seeing the opportunity that exists to have PR intersect with inbound marketing. Was PR part of your strategy as well?
It was in terms of who we had speaking and the topics that they were
Yeah.
speaking on. At that point in the world, to be completely transparent on the PR side, it was
Yeah.
tough to get a story that wasn't related to COVID.
Y-
But I
Yeah.
can tell you at previous roles the way that I've used PR in sort of the same way. There's a really good example. I was running marketing for an ad tech company a couple years ago, and it was a smaller company, and we were competing with the likes of Salesforce, who had bought a company called Buddy Media, and some other really big, multi-hundred employee companies. And we had to get our name on the map, and we kind of thought, how do we do it? Of course, we want content, we want inbound, but we wanted the amplification through PR. And so what we ended up doing was we had a ton of spend coming through our platform on Facebook ads. And so what we would do is right before an earnings call that Facebook would have about 2 weeks before, we would put out one of our reports. And we would talk
Mm.
about our costs on Facebook going up or down. Are we seeing more spend happening in this continent or that continent? What's happening with mobile ad spend? And we ended up going to all the investment banks in New York City and saying, hey, if you want us to come present this data to your team and your clients, we'd be happy to do it. And they said, oh, of course, we'd love for you to do that. Really? You're willing to do that for free? And we said, yeah, but as soon as you get called on by Bloomberg or CNBC to go on TV to talk about it, you got to bring us on. And they did. And so we ended up going on every single, basically, kind of financial news show. We got in all the major financial publications, the Wall Street Journal, and then we just started doing that every single quarter. So it was a way where we had a really small team. We were 2, 3 people, but just by creating the right report with the right story, with the unique data that we had, and finding the people that could help us amplify it and also bring them value, it's a perfect partnership.
I love stories like that, where you have an experiment that kind of you take a little bit of maybe it's a risk, right? It's a risk in that you only have so many hours in the day and you only have so many resources, and where do you put that time and effort and that potential lost opportunity cost if it doesn't work out? But clearly that was crazy successful. That's awesome. It's a great story.
The risk part, the risk part
Yeah.
is big because
Yeah.
I do remember the first time I left the Boston office and went down to New York, and my people were asking, so what are you doing? Like, oh, I'm spending the day with Goldman Sachs, or I'm spending the day with JP Morgan. Like, what are you doing? How is this at all helping the company? I was like, nah, just give me a couple weeks. It's going to pay off. It's going to pay off. But the initial response was sort of, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah. And luckily you were able to, get that response in a couple of weeks. I mean, some experiments, sometimes you have to wait even longer, and to let things run. And sometimes they don't work, right? Like
Oh, they
sometimes you
usually
try
don't work.
something.
Oh yeah,
They
that one story I told you. Yeah, that was my one. That was the one that worked for the other 8 things that had failed before that. So yeah,
Well, I love experiments, and I if I could have like my little wish list for all marketers, it's that all marketers have a portion of their time that they can carve out, a portion of their time and budget, I should say, carve out just for experimentation. Um, Anything like that you've been playing with lately? Any other marketing experiments that things you're trying to accomplish and
yeah,
any re-
it's a good question. And by the way, it's so hard to do that once you're in the weeds of a company, which now
yeah.
seemingly happens after like 2 months.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
just so in the weeds of something that it's hard to just reset and come back. I try and tell the new people that we're hiring on the team, they're always so eager to come in and hit the ground running and go. And I'd say, no, 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 do the opposite of that. Sit,
Mhm.
learn, listen, don't do anything. Because once you start going, you're never going to be able to stop. And you can
Right.
only join the company once and actually have this nice set of fresh eyes that haven't been tainted by the day to day. But one thing I love right now is there is so much conversation going on around the world, whether it's through video format, written format, audio format. For us, we know the companies that we're trying to sell to. Whether it's SMB or enterprise, the vertical, the use case. To some degree, the people. What we're trying to do is capture the moments and the places where the people we want to talk to are happening. and then insert ourselves either into the conversation directly or follow up directly after in a helpful way. Example being, hey, COO of this company, I heard you speaking at that conference last week, and you talked about a challenge being XYZ. Just wanted to share this story with you. Those types of
Mhm.
things. So we're trying to do is position ourselves in the right place at the right time in front of the right person every single time. And it's not, I can tell you, it's not through sort of the traditional inbound methods of just let's just do blog posts, let's just do SEO. Sometimes you're working in areas where the search volume isn't where it needs to be, or it's just not
Yeah.
as developed as the market. And category creation is great. We're heavily focused on weather intelligence, which is a term that we coined. But that's a long-term strategy and it takes time. So we also have to make sure that we're, as I mentioned earlier, amplifying our message to the right people.
So I imagine you have a really well-aligned sales force with your marketing strategies too then.
So we as much as we can, we try and go after the vertical every time so that we know the
Mhm.
use cases. The people that we're speaking to are verticalized experts. Oftentimes they'll come from the vertical, whether they worked in the aviation world
Mhm.
or energy space or on demand space in the past. Because what I've found is that sure, any marketer can get the attention of someone. If you're good enough at marketing, we can get your attention, and I
Yeah.
don't really have to understand your world. But once I have your attention, I can lose it exceptionally quickly. And once I've lost it, I'm not going to get it back for a very, very long time. So we need to make
Yeah.
sure that just because I've gotten your attention, I've gotten it because I know I can keep it. And the way that I know
Yeah.
I can keep it is by verticalize and that deeper expertise.
Yep. No, that I agree completely. It's something I know we're doing with our own team here on our our sales and marketing team at SmartBag, and it is very true for sure. Even thinking about clients, I mean, we have had a client that sold medical samples, or sorry, that showed tissue samples to medical researchers, and when you're selling to that type of buyer persona, I mean, we you need a PhD writing the content. You need sales teams who understand that world so well, because you're right. If you make one misstep, you say one term incorrectly, right? You could be as polished as you work really hard at polishing up that language, but if you don't really know what you're talking about, you're going to do significant damage to your brand, and that
Yeah, I
has
love I love
lasting
the one
effects.
word because I can give a real example of that. In some of the industries that we'll go after, we'll say things like, "Hey, you can help keep your employees safe if you use our platform," and the reasons are X, Y, Z. But they'll say, "We have crews, we don't have employees," and it's just
Yeah.
a very very
Yep.
nuanced. And they know, okay, clearly you don't know my industry.
Yep. Yeah, we see that with senior living communities. We don't use the word facility. Yeah, so many trigger words that we
Yeah,
have as people, because you're selling to people, right? You're marketing to people. So awesome.
yeah.
Well, I want to talk about data a little bit. And today, in order to be a really solid digital and inbound marketer, you're very data driven. If you can only view one dashboard every morning to let you know as CMO how healthy this organization is, how healthy your department is, what do you need to have on that dashboard?
It's a good question. So for us, it varies by the focus area. So the SMB dashboard is a little bit different than the enterprise dashboard, a bit different than
Sure.
the B2C. But I'll just use the enterprise one as an example. I think for me, I'm looking at the most credible and trustworthy signals that I can possibly find. So classic enterprise sales takes time. It's one of the reasons that I love B2C or SMB because you just get response time
Yeah.
so much faster. But we all know enterprise sales it's a longer sales cycle. So
Mhm.
there are things I need to understand that tell me if I got this many impressions, this many clicks, or this many calls, it resulted in this many discovery calls or demos. And I know based on those numbers what that's going to equate to over the course of the next 3, 6, 12 months, both in terms of number of customers, but also TCV as well. And I can back into what my pipeline expectations are based on some of those signals. So for me,
Yeah.
I just sort of accept the fact that I can't speed up time, I can't look into the future, and I have to look at the most concrete stepping blocks that I have in front of me. So it's things like that.
Cool. That very it's I feel like we can get you can spend all day kind of digging deeper and deeper and looking at everything from email open rates to website, page visits and ranking terms and all of these pieces. But at the end of the day, it's about really knowing at a high level, like what what is really moving the needle for your business, what is keeping things what's helping keep things in motion, and not getting lost in the data, being able to actually do something with it. um,
Yeah,
I mean, when you see something, and that the doing something with it is, I feel, the hardest part. Like, I've worked with marketers over my career who they can run these solid reports and they can tell you exactly, diagnose the problem, but then what do you do? What's the solution? Are have you been in a situation before where maybe we can actually talk about it from, I know COVID was definitely a big turning point for a lot of organizations, maybe other than that, where you saw something you didn't like, and how do you respond to it? Who do you involve in the organization when you notice a trend, or you notice kind of a change in a trend?
Hmm. Yeah, it's an excellent question. And my last one, by the way, on your reporting question is, I do like to look as far down the bottom of the funnel as possible, and I do like to start there
Yeah.
because ultimately, if a member of the marketing team pulls something off, whether we get a PR article or we create a really great post or we put a really nice
Mhm.
campaign live, it's all great. Great effort, great idea, but what was the result of it? And I have to start with the result and work my way back up.
Yeah.
It's the only way you can really figure out what's wrong. But for us, like we're fortunate to have a. I have some fantastic peers at Tomorrow.io. So our go to market and sort of customer team is really aligned. We don't think about ourselves as a sales and marketing team or a sales and CS and marketing team. We really think about ourselves as a go to market team. And so I have a CRO, a chief customer officer, our chief product officer. We're quite aligned on everything that's happening from starting with the revenue goals, which we know for the year, for the quarter, and then we understand where do we expect that to come from, whether it's net new or growth. How do we expect to get it, and what do those funnels look like? And so we're looking at those on a consistent basis. And if we aren't 100% aligned at all times, which we never are, no one ever is, but
Yeah.
as long as we're striving for that and we're having the hard conversations before it's too late, that at least gives us all confidence that we're moving in the right direction.
What I want you to kind of take a step aside and think about, like, big picture, big dream marketing initiatives. And this is interesting because you pulled off a big one already. You said, okay, let's just throw this conference within 6 weeks and get these phenomenal speakers. Um, if I asked you to pretend time and money are not an issue at all, is there a kind of a campaign, a strategy, a marketing tactic that over your career you've just been itching to try?
It's an excellent question. Um, it's a good question. I don't think I've ever had something go truly viral.
Mm,
Um, I've seen, I've run growth loops with, marketplaces and social media networks and driven millions of people and that kind of thing. But in terms of an ad campaign, a creative idea, maybe it's because I'm not in the B2C world anymore. But it looks like it would be a pretty wild ride. I'm sure it's not as glamorous as it looks like, but yeah, I've never had something go like truly globally viral.
like, just trending, like, on TikTok and
We come
becoming
up
like,
with the
yeah,
most we come up with the most creative, funny, witty weather
yeah.
ad that gets shared on Instagram, and it just goes 10
Yeah.
million likes. Yeah. It'd
All
be
right.
fun. It'd be fun to see that.
I I think it could happen. I mean, I think you can. Let's let's
Never. Hey,
let's
you never
we'll
know.
put it out there. We're putting it out there into the universe here. So,
Yeah, we just went through our winter ad campaign planning, so those will be rolling out the next couple of months. So you never know.
all right, all right. Well, we'll keep our eyes open. Um, well, Dan, before I let you go, I want to talk about your book. So I think it was in May of 2020. Um, you published "Understanding Startup CEOs." and the mindset you need to successfully work for one. When I read this title, I thought, oh my gosh, I think I need to pour myself a scotch for this. Just, having come from startup land and everything. But I got to know, what inspired this? What inspired you to write this? What was your goal in writing it and publishing this book?
Good questions. I had someone I used to work with was in an executive position at a very fast growing startup. And the CEO they were reporting into was kind of a high profile CEO, just brilliant, knew exactly what to do and how and all those kinds of things. Person I used to work with just sort of sent me an email one day and just said, I'm really spinning. I don't
Yeah.
know what to do in this position. I don't even know how to work with the CEO. I can't tell if every time I get on a call with him, if it's going to go well or if I'm going to be asked to resign. It was a rough time for this individual. We got on a call real quick and just sort of walked this individual through all the different ideas that I had, and it was really based on my own experience, what I'd seen other people go through, and what had worked, and more importantly, what wasn't going to work. And so we had a fairly long discussion. I happened to be in San Francisco at the time. Got an email back the next day just saying that was so wildly helpful. I had sent him an email with all the points that I put in there as well. And the comment was just, this really needs to be a book.
Mm.
So I'm boarding my flight back to Boston. It was one of those flights where I just didn't have anything to do. I don't know if it was serendipitous or maybe I did. I just wasn't thinking about it because I was just paying attention to this email. And I wrote the skeleton to the book on the flight home. I probably wrote 75% of the rough book just on that flight.
Wow.
What I didn't know was that the remaining 25%, the remaining 10% is what ends up taking the full year or more to actually write. But again, being naive to the process, I figured how hard can it be to write a book? So
Yeah.
that's what inspired it. It was really someone just reaching out. And what I've come to find over the past year or so since the book went public is that it's these are the same problems everyone has. There's so many blessings and opportunities that come from being able to work for a startup and being able to work for some of these CEOs. But there's also just some universal truths that you can't run from. And if you don't address them head on and proactively, it just usually doesn't end well for both sides because neither side ends up being happy.
Have you had any feedback from any startup CEOs who've read the book?
I have.
Yeah.
It's more so than I thought, which has been awesome to see. To be honest, I've had startups basically say this was everything I wanted to tell my executive team, but I didn't want to say it, or it was just too much to say. So
Yeah.
much so that there's a couple companies that have made it required reading for all new employees, which is great. The
That
CEOs have basically just said, if I could sit down with every new employee and tell them something, it would be this book. So that's just what we do now.
that that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I hope you should be really proud of that. And basically, like, here's my operating manual. I've felt that way over the years about like my disc profile. I don't know how familiar you
Yeah.
are, but I my D is very 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 high, and my C is very 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 low. And so there's times where I just want to take that profile and just hand it to someone and say like, here, my apologies, like this is who I am. So.
Yeah. I love it. I
Um,
love it.
Oh, awesome. Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining me today. I shared so many valuable insights and experiences. If anyone listening wants to learn more about you or the work they're doing, where do you recommend that they go?
My LinkedIn profile is there, and then the book's on Amazon. So
Perfect. Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Please join us next week for another episode of the Intelligent Inbound podcast. You'll meet other industry experts who are challenging the status quo for inbound marketing. And if you learned something today from Dan, please pay it forward by rating and reviewing us on your podcast listening platform of choice. Make it a great day.